I am just going to talk a little bit about, we might hopefully manage to claw back a bit of time, but talking about communicating and engaging your research. It feels sometimes like it's somebody else's job, I think. I know when you're sort of deep into the depths of your research, it can feel like a kind of add-on. It's actually vitally important for everything, really, that you are, especially with health research, because the research that you're doing has implications to people's real health. It has implications for policy. It has implications for the way that clinicians work. It has implications for the behavior of the public with their health, and as well as it also having impact for other researchers. So these are all kind of different audiences, and I've bundled this together. I mean, in University of Bristol, in other universities, these are often like lots of different job functions: communications, public engagement, marketing, widening participation. All these different things are different functions, but actually they're all kind of part and parcel of this communicating and engaging your research. So I am going to just tell you a bit about what we've done in ICEP. It's a real top overview. I've actually only been working on ICEP for two and a half years. And I only work for ICEP 1 day a week. So it is a lot of these things. It's not me taking claim for everything. The real important thing that I can do is provide support and help people and guide people and navigate them to the right places to get support. I'm also going to just give you some tips on communicating and engaging. This is lots of these are reused from longer talks that I've done and sort of training things I've done with postgrads. So this is just a quick kind of summary and some tips. Then, because you've done a lot of listening to other people, we have a little exercise to try. I apologize. I cannot think of any way to make the exercise accessible without sight, but the exercise will be short, but everyone will hear the results of it, hopefully, if there are some kind volunteers. And then I'm just going to summarize how you can get to support and answer any questions. So this is not a pretty slide because basically I ran out of time, but these are some of the things that we do in ICEP. It is so it's basically kind of a list because it's an ugly slide. News stories, blog posts, social media engagement, website, videos. That's the kind of, well, I guess, the more communication side. We also do going to festivals and visiting schools. And we've had some public roundtables. I know, Emma, when you were a PhD student, you had some things where members of the public came along and chatted about cancer with you, and you taught them a bit about what you do. And I think that was really great. Pint of Science earlier this year. Pint of Science, for those who don't know, it sort of goes on all over the country, but there's always things going on in Bristol. Basically, they hire out pubs or similar kind of venues, and people come along in the evening, and researchers just tell them in an accessible way stuff that's going on and answer questions. It's a lot of fun. We had at least one person involved in the ICEP program was speaking at Pint of Science this year. And so that is, if you're interested in getting involved, I can help with any of these things. These are things we have done in ICEP, things that we've told CIUK about as well. But I think those are kind of the down the line things. I think that this is also an ugly side. But basically, why do we do this? And here is the things in the dark blue. Those are like organizational things. So this is just some of the things. I'm sure there will be other things people can think about. But basically, health research, it's important to talk about this because it actually impacts everybody. So there's this opportunity to influence policymakers about the health policies they do. There's also the opportunity to shape how healthcare happens. talk to clinicians, helping to bridge that understanding between what's happening in the research world and what people are seeing with their patients. I think it was mentioned yesterday that there's a vital role of being able to, we're funded by CI UK. We can tell CI UK stories that actually help them to talk to their wider public that gives money to support the work that we do. So having stories to share with CI UK is really, really important. We are, of course, all representing institutions, lots of people from the University of Bristol, but also all the other partners in ICEP. Anything that we're communicating is representing ICEP, it's representing our universities, our research institutions, the medical school. So that is really important. It is the kind of thing that wider organisations can share, and vital we get to hear from wider stakeholders. I'll kind of give an example of that. It's sort of on the border between public engagement and PPIE, and our PPIE group helped to develop this activity. But we were at a festival in the summer, at the Green Mound Festival. We had a stall there, and looking ahead towards the obesity cancer epidemiology programme, something that had come up in the PPIE group is about the language, which I think people also talked about yesterday and Helen mentioned earlier. So we had an activity on the stall, just asking people how comfortable they feel about talking about their weight in terms of health research. And it was collecting comments, and it was just a box with 3 holes that people were adding their comments to, whether it was a smiley face or like a neutral face or a sad face. You'll be pleased to know, overwhelmingly, it was happy faces or neutral faces. But there were also some really good constructive comments about, like, more like, if you're going to do it, I need to know why you want to know that information, or provide it as part of a wider context. Don't make me feel guilty. But also, these are the words not to use. So I will share those findings, those kind of things in more detail, like as a document. But that was kind of a nice way to actually hear from stakeholders, and they actually wanted to contribute. They wanted to come and find out what we were doing, because we were also asking them what they were doing. And it was a nice example, because this is an activity that I kind of had the idea of, and then I ran it past our PPIA group, and they kind of was like, actually, that's great, but you could also do this. Those are all like the wider big picture things, but there are also advantages for each and every one of us when we develop our communications and engagement skills. These are things that are needed every time you go to a conference, or talking to people who are maybe not quite in the same specialty as you, talking to policymakers, or whatever. These are all the kind of skills that are important to develop. And it also, when you talk about your work and you kind of simplify it for someone else, it also helps you understand it in a new way. It really helps you to see, actually, that is the thing that's really, really kind of valuable. And that is how I want to say it, which is really very useful for everyone. It helps you sort of stop and take stock. And then, of course, when you've got all these materials about engagement things that you've done, you can also use them in grant applications. Richard was mentioning the impact studies, and how they sort of impact case studies, and how we use them in the OCEP proposal. Having that kind of resource of things to draw on that help to explain the research in a good way will then be really, really valuable for grants, but also, I think, very many situations now with academic promotions, you want to be able to share the wider things that you've done. So I've spent a lot of time talking about that slide, but this is now moving on to the kind of practical, how you do it, the things to think about. And I think, because I gave you that list of things we've done in ICEP, a lot of times when researchers come to me, they say, I want to do this thing. And, I want to do a press release, I want to do a blog post, or whatever. And yeah, it's great. But actually, I think, well, sometimes we need to turn it on our head. So actually, there's these questions to consider in kind of communicating and engagement, and we need to kind of take a step back, and it's like, actually, first of all, why do you want to do it? And then like, who do you want to talk with? And then we kind of get through the processes to actually what you're going to do. It may be that you've come saying, I want to do a press release, but actually the audience you really want to reach is a particular funder or some industry partners or whatever, or actually like that's just going to saturate the kind of your university's press offering with stuff that is not really very interesting to the press, and it kind of it's better to have that conversation kind of earlier on, and rather than you spending loads of time working on something that's like, actually this is only half the story, or this is not quite the right way to package this. So just yeah, so the why question, what, and this is a picture of a big question mark. What difference do you want to make by sharing your research? Is there some kind of, is there a policy change you want? Is there a behavior change you want? Is there awareness raising? Is there feedback on your research that you want from other people? So that's the kind of first thing to think about, I think. And then who do you want to reach? So this is a picture of a kitten getting into some trainers, saying like, put yourself in their shoes. So this is who is your audience? If you are wanting to talk to industry, that is one way you might want to talk about to them. If you're wanting to talk to the public, that's another thing, if it's policy. So working out those kind of first things, but also then digging a bit deeper. So the public is not one homogenous group. The public will be all sorts of different people. They Eve has highlighted accessibility issues, which is a really, really important thing to consider. Who are the people you want to reach, and where are they coming from? What do they know already? How do you meet them where they are? Because people will feel really de-skilled and kind of uncomfortable if you meet them at sort of too high a level or sort of a different level from where they are at, and they can't get a hook to work out what you're doing. So right, this is a picture of a mountain. We've got some hikers near the bottom of the mountain. It is quite tempting. It's not just about communicating once you've reached your end goal. It's really tempting to think, I'm going to work on this thing for 5 years, and then I'm going to do a press release about it or whatever. Then I'm going to publish my paper, and then I will have this. But actually, all the way through, we talked a lot about PPIE, and this is kind of tied up with that. Talking to people as you're doing things, finding out what they think. Also, like we are exploring this. This is an important question. This is the start of a conversation. So it's also worth not just doing communications and engagement, but also thinking about it early on, thinking as part of your grant proposals, thinking like, how are we going to be communicating what we're doing? How are we going to be engaging with wider audiences? Right, this is an explosion of colour, this picture. This is a lot of bits of sellotape. This is now the what. So we are thinking about what you're actually wanting to do. And this thing that marketing communications people talk about a lot is key messages. So what is the real thing that you want to get people to understand from what you are doing? Every time we do a public engagement activity, we think about the kind of objectives and the like 3 or 4 kind of key messages that we want to get across. And those, of course, won't be actually kind of homogenous. There will be different bits of those messages that are important to people, to different segments of the audience. It relates to that who question. When we go to a festival, we know that people who might visit our stall will range from like toddlers to members of the public who are consultant surgeons or whatever, who for some reason have decided to spend their time at a festival coming and talking to people who do healthcare research. It's amazingly common there. And so how like there'll be that sort of overall picture, but actually how you what really probably with the little kids, it's just like science is cool and health is important. But when you're actually talking to people who are kind of real experts in something related, it's a different conversation. But overall, whatever those things, it's actually what the key messages and making sure they are something that it will sort of stick with people. And the things that will stick, so things that are simple, you don't want to drown people out with stuff that is over their heads. I have I guess an example kind of early on when I started working in the Integrative Cancer Epidemiology Unit. I remember going to a meeting, one of the first group meetings I went to. I'm not an epidemiologist, and people were just talking about SNPs. Most people in this room will know what SNPs are. I was there looking at the slides and going, we haven't written SNP anywhere. And then I saw SNPs and I was like, oh, are they what you mean by SNPs? And then I was like, but what's an SNP? And then I was Googling that to then find out A, what the acronym means, and then B, what it actually is. And by that time, I'd missed probably 5 minutes of what the person was actually talking about. It left me feeling like, well, it's okay, I'm not an epidemiologist. So that was sort of fine, but it left me feeling like I actually don't know what's going on anymore. Unexpected. I think yesterday we heard a nice thing. This is kind of a nice example from yesterday, which I think turns into a nice communications thing. The whole idea in general that obesity is a factor, increased weight is a factor in increasing your cancer. But then Grace yesterday was then talking about childhood, being overweight as a child, being protective in breast cancer. That is the kind of thing that is an unexpected, and so that is kind of like, oh, that's interesting, that's not what I expected. That kind of makes an interesting message. Things that are concrete, you don't want to do the kind of like, this project was done and this thing leads that there may be this and this and this and this. That is kind of too woolly. If it's still at a woolly stage, maybe this isn't the time to communicate exactly that thing. But at the same time, the flip side, it needs to be credible. So we don't want to be telling people things that are sort of actually not true, and or massive kind of extrapolations, because that obviously discredits the science, it discredits the work here. Emotional things are good. Something that I found so powerful working with our user reference group is that they are coming with like, this is my cancer story. And, we had a little taste of that today, that emotional connection. Sometimes we've worked with CRUK on developing press releases, and it's about a particular cancer, but they then have they kind of bring into the story somebody they know with that cancer, who's had that cancer. So their story isn't just researchers at the University of Bristol have done, but actually like, this is Jane who has suffered with this cancer and her life got turned upside down by this, and here's her experience, and here's some research that can help to feed into that. And that kind of story thing, we also saw that with Helen's thing yesterday at the end of the day, as it was kind of, actually, here's my story of my experience working in New Zealand with Maori women, and that personal connection is an important kind of what for messages. This is a slide with some pictures of some little bits of communications that we've done. I said probably this should have been the earlier slide when I said what we've done in ICEP. So what we have is a picture of, there's Emma there, and this was visiting a primary school. We had Emma and another researcher who's not involved in ICEP, I think, are holding giant cuddly chromosomes. The activity there, this is about teaching people about things that are inherited. So they were cutting out little pieces. The children had little scraps of genes, and they were writing on the scraps of genes or drawing pictures of things that you inherit from your parents. The idea then they'd be thinking about like inherited health conditions, then they were sticking them on the chromosomes. It was an excellent pun, and the chromosomes are really cuddly. There is the next picture is of a roadshow just engaging with the public about research from the smoking cessation area of our work. There's a point of science picture. There is a lovely picture of us at the Green Man Festival. Caroline is in that picture. It was tipping with rain then, but we were actually talking about missing data and kind of selection bias. But it was presented as kind of how does health data, what happens, how to get the wrong answer with health data. And that leads to really interesting conversations. A lot of people kind of also interested in, like, it's kind of amazing you're actually talking about methods as public engagement. This example of a press release, it's related to the flavoured vapes research that Angela was talking about yesterday. And there's also an example of a video that was from the e-bikes and prostate cancer work that was talked about yesterday. So those are all some nice examples of how to present things. Those are just a few of the things. There are very, very many more ways we can communicate to many different audiences. This actually sort of summarizes what we said before. Mainly this is having a communication strategy. That's kind of putting all those elements together, the messages and the who you want to talk to and the what you want to achieve. Two things to highlight which were not in the who, what, why, where, who, what thing is it's important to also think about the practicalities, the timescales and the resources you've got on hand. So do we actually have any budget for this? Do we have any support? Do we have any time? And very, very many ideas emerge that we just don't have time to do. And I don't think we can beat ourselves up about that. That's just the reality that we have to kind of prioritize just because we don't have infinite money and infinite time and infinite skills. And the other thing that is really, really important, I don't think it's done enough, but evaluation. So whenever we go to a festival or a school visit or whatever, like the researchers breathe a sigh of relief because they finished that really intensive thing. And then they get an email from me saying, like, could you share your experiences? And it'll always be like a shared evaluation form. I don't need to know who the people who are applying is, but how did it go? But not just in the general sense, how did it go? But did we have enough resources? How did the preparation time go? Were we the right team? What kind of impact did we see from this? What can we learn? What should we feed back to the school teachers or the organisers, or what could we do differently next time? Crucially, it's not just we do that form as a tick box. Then next time we do an activity, we look back at what happened before and say, actually, we realised last time we didn't have that conversation with the school teachers far enough in advance, and we didn't realise they hadn't done that bit in their curriculum yet, or like, or we, a very obvious thing, maybe we didn't have a poster saying we were University of Bristol, and people were like, where are you from? Those are the kind of things that sound so obvious, but also you can end up with those, we've got so many different things going on that you can miss those. Right, so this is very, very quickly to say you can flip round. When academics write things or present things, they tend to start with the kind of so-and-so et al. In 1852 posited that such and such would happen and this thing, and then like you're kind of 3 pages into a paper before you get like, and we found this. I mean, even in the abstract, it's halfway down the abstract before you get an idea that you might have something really interesting. So I was a journalist before, in the past, I was a science and technology journalist for 16 years. One of the first things I was taught was this journalist triangle. This is basically the first thing you have is the most important, most newsworthy thing. And if you listen to the news, if you read the newspaper, if you listen to the news on the television or the radio, what they will say is that headline. This thing happened. They won't give that whole background context to whatever. That will get unpacked later. So if you just hear the headline, you've got an idea what happened. They've then go into here's a bit more detail, and then you have the background stuff, kind of like, you know, this has been a thing that's been building for a long time, or this is the other stuff that's going on. What it means is you can actually cut from the bottom of a news story and you can still get a sense right up to the kind of the headline. You are getting what it is. I was going to show you very quick. This is an example that isn't epidemiology, because I think if I gave you an epidemiology example, you would not maybe see what's missing. But this is a press release that University of Bristol press team turned into a press release. This is about wild jackdaws and their social relationships, but so the abstract starts, influential theories of the evolution of cognition and cooperation posit that tracking information about others allows individuals to... That's not the end of the sentence. That sentence is actually 3 lines. And in fact, the sentences look like they're at least 3 lines. I don't know anything about jackdaws. In fact, it doesn't even mention jackdaws in the first couple of sentences of the abstract, although it is about jackdaws. But I believe it was really interesting because the university then did a press release about it, and you can see how they've turned it upside down. Jackdaws switch friends to gain food, but stick with family. And that is the kind of flipped on its head, but the same findings. I have another example here. Emergent symmetry in a low dimensional superconductor on the edge of moltenness. Don't know if anybody knows what that means. Upon cooling, condensed matter systems typically transition into states of lower symmetry. The converse, i.e. the emergence of higher symmetry at lower temperatures is extremely rare, and it goes on and it gets more complicated. Research reveals rare metal could offer a revolutionary switch for future quantum devices. That's kind of getting to what the story is behind the stuff that is not the story. Now, that's enough of me talking. Here's an exercise for you. Really, really important when you're communicating to have, as you write, the right language. I have on the screen a QR code and the URL there. If you go to that and you've got about 5 minutes, I don't know how we're doing for time, but this is a website that challenges you to talk about your research or your whatever complex issue in the 1000 most common words in the English language. And I say 1000 rather than 1000 because 1000 is not one of those words. That's just an idea of how complicated it is. So if you put in, what you can do in this tool is put into there like a research description. It will tell you how many words pass the test, and then you keep trying and simplifying to see whether you can get a description that vaguely approximates to what you do. And then I'm hoping some volunteers might say, actually, like, here's what it said about my research. What I suggest, because I know we're ready for the next speaker and behind on time, I suggest we do some more of this in the break. And if you have anything, when you found some things, we can write them on the flip chart paper, and then later we can tell everybody what they were when we do our reflections at the end. So this is how to get hold of me. I work at the University of Bristol, but I work for the whole programme. So if you're doing stuff elsewhere, not the University of Bristol, still get in touch with me, and happy to help.